Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So, the question, whether an active companion or an augment companion will be best with the new changes. Let's go ahead and find out. Well, first things first, augment companions were initially bugged when these current changes came to the preview server. And now they have gone ahead and fixed them. They have adjusted them so that they now equally give the same amount of stats as an active companion, as you can see here, comparing the stats of the lion compared to, let's say, looking at this polar bear cub here. You can see the stats are pretty much the same. Now, the advantage to an augment companion is that they will have an enhancement bonus. Now, I do not know exactly why. When you go ahead and actually even summon an augment companion, they no longer show the enhancement bonus here. So I'll show you on screen here the different enhancement bonuses for the different companions. For example, this polar bear cub will give me the extra stats of their being power, critical strike, and also our awareness. And we can see that by comparing it to, let's say, an active companion. Looking at, let's say, this quickling here, you can compare the stats and you can see exactly which ones have been given a buff. For example, I'm just there 3000 more critical strike, I'm just there about over 2000 more awareness buffed, and at power there I'm also just over 3000 there. Active companions, you will see, will give you exactly the same amount of stats all the time. I click through a whole bunch of these and they all give exactly the same stats. And then on top of that, looking at your different augments, you can see different stats will change depending on which augment companion you are selecting, because each augment companion has a different enhancement bonus which will buff 3 different types of stats. This bullet used to be the best, and it will buff your power, your combat advantage, and also your defense. And you can see that when I go ahead and select a different augment, I will be reduced in those certain stats and buffed in other areas. Now, does this buff in stats make up for what active companions can do in their damage wise? Well, I'll go ahead and, let's say, summon the famed Xuna. First, let's quickly upgrade her to mythic there to make it fair. So we are currently in the stronghold. We have 4 dummies here and we don't have any buffs to our companion whatsoever. You can see here no insignia bonuses, and looking in our companion gear, we have no indomitable runestones that would buff her damage. And we go ahead and hit the dummies and we can see what damage she does. You can see she does her bloodbath there, and she's doing about 800 to 1700 there on that initial bloodbath. You can see I'll do it again here, and that is only if she crits and doesn't deflect. You can see there the max hits being there about 1800, and this is pretty terrible. Now, that does not mean she is terrible, because we have 0 buffs on the potential that she can do. Now, first let's compare on the live server. This is the live server here. You can see evidently by the ratings and whatnot. I currently have Xuna, and I have, yes, all of the buffs that I could have. I have a whole bunch of indomitable runestones. However, a few of them are only rank 14 there, just meaning I'm losing out on 4% damage. And over here in the mount section, I have 2 warlords inspirations. I'll demonstrate how much damage she can actually do. So she goes ahead and she does her bloodbath, and she's dealing there on average to 130,000 on those hits. We'll go ahead and summon her back. There we go. And then she'll do her bloodbath again. And there you can see those 130,000 on those critical hits on that bloodbath. Now let's go ahead and compare all that over on here on the preview server, where we have these new upcoming changes. Compared to what she does here in this character, it's abysmal, right? She's only dealing up to 1800 on those hits. But let's go ahead and switch over to my character where I have her fully buffed up. So here we go. Again, here we have Xuna. However, she now is up to mythic. And on our mount section, we have 2 of those warlords inspirations, along with on our companion gear, we have indomitable runestones. Now, things have changed with these runestones, as they now grant a 40% damage buff for every runestone there. meaning we can get a total of 240% extra damage on our active companions. But does this make up for using her instead of, let's say, an augment to give you those extra stats? Well, let's see how much damage she actually does now. Let's set off a burst and let's see what she does on her bloodbath. And there we go, we're getting those markers up to nearly 4,000 and sometimes higher if we're lucky on the non-deflex. And there we have it. So on average about 4,000, then you have all those bleeds going off about 500. Now I will do act logs and actually show you comparably how much damage they do, but if I were to go use an augment companion instead, what would I gain? Well, as I shown you there, we can only gain about 3,000 of 3 different types of stats. Now with these new changes, 3,000 is actually pretty significant. Looking at my item level now, it's at 50,700. Reason being is they went ahead and they buffed mount collars to now have 1,000 item level. So we go ahead and we look at an augment companion, and let's say we use the bullet. The bullet's going to buff my power and my combat advantage. Combat advantage and power are like the main 2 stats you want to be using when you're running party content, because you'll generally have this combat advantage up all the time, and your power you'll also always gain the benefit no matter what content you're doing if you're trying to do damage. So summoning a bullet gives me those buffs in those stats, and now I'm overcapped in power, getting myself a good bit more combat advantage as well to boot, along with a bit more defense. Now I don't know the current standing of how much defense we need to have with the current content that is out there. Testing is still needed to be done along with different adjustments, especially in Tower of the Mad Mage and Zariel, but we shall see what happens. So now using that augment, I'm overcapped in power, meaning it's not actually very viable to run this augment for that power bonus because it's just so easy to cap out in power, and thus I may as well use an active companion or an augment companion that gives me buffs in other areas. For example, I could go ahead and use the Owlbear Cub. The Owlbear Cub gives me additional benefit to my combat advantage, my critical strike, along with my accuracy. All 3 stats which are very well needed for a DPS. And you can see there I'm getting those stats up a good bit higher just with running an augment. It is very hard to say whether to run an augment or a active companion because the damage values on an active companion are pretty small. Let's go ahead and run a full-on test with the Abyssal Chicken. Now the Abyssal Chicken used to be the big dog in dealing single target damage, and if we go ahead and actually look at its swarm effect now, you can see it's actually doing 3 swarms, so it's going to be a whole lot better in AoE. Those swarms last for a significant amount of time, and we can get those damage values up there only at about 1,700 on a critical hit and lower on an off crit. Now he does have a powerful rake attack there which can deal to 7,000, but combat companions still have the issue of targets having defense, and now our active companions don't have armor pen stat to negate this like they used to. Looking over on the live server here, the meta was to go ahead and buff up a companion's armor pen, skyrocketing it here up to 50,000 to make sure they have it capped, so when they go ahead and attack the target, they don't actually reduce it by any way because they have completely negated the target's defense. And we go ahead and summon this Abyssal Chicken. This is the live server, and we can go ahead and actually see what it does on its swarm. You can see there it does insane values of damage on its swarm there, dealing on off crits there 240,000. The on crits, which are deflex, were only 120,000 abouts, and it can do insane amounts of damage on this live server as it currently stands. There 200,000 on each of those crits on the swarm. However, you can see it's only doing 2 of those swarms. So back on the preview server, Do I think active companions are going to be useful? Well, in solo content, yes, they're going to be useful still, because you can give that combat advantage from them. You can gain that combat advantage. You can see I can stand this side and I gain combat advantage against this dummy, meaning looking at my combat advantage stat, I'll gain 65% extra damage against this dummy, which is huge. However, in party content, you can just use other players to gain combat advantage, and therefore that's not overly useful. Active companions are only supposed to bridge the gap difference between an augment companion. An augment companion gives you those additional stats, and an active companion will just do a bit of damage for you. Now, of course, there are other active companions. There are other active companions which will actually give you buffs and things rather than just doing pure damage. So here I am back on my Paladin, and what companions I'm talking about is, yes, for example, this companion, Angel of Protection. It has the ability to straight up give you the benefit of you taking 5% less damage, and on top of that it has a ward ability where basically it will intercept half the damage you take for 10 seconds if you get hit for more than 5% of your maximum hit points. However, this does have a cooldown of 60 seconds. Along with that, there is also this Stalwart Lion. The Stalwart Lion has the ability to give you extra damage through granting you radiant weapon stacks, and along with that it has the ability to, when you stand adjacent to it, you gain the benefit of its Aurulent Coalition, where basically it will intercept 10% of the damage you take while you stand adjacent to him. You can see when I'm next to him, he gains that aura around him, and I gain this buff up here. Now let's go ahead and check actually what that looks like when I'm fighting Halaster. I won't block, and you'll see those shield markers when I stand adjacent to the lion. And when Halaster hits me, you can see those shield markers. And those shield markers are not from me blocking, but from the lion's aura blocking the damage. And if we actually look at it here, you can see my Aurulent Coalition absorbs damage. And it's absorbing not a bad amount at all. There it absorbed 85,000. So in essence, it makes this lion to actually be useful for helping you either tank or helping DPS to survive. And along with that, let's show you the Angel of Protection. Looking at it right here. First up, it gives me that extra defense. It'll help me cap this out. But let's go ahead and approach Halaster. Now initially Halaster's going to hit me. I'm not going to block. However, the Angel will immediately start blocking. You can see the Angel went ahead and absorbed for 570,000. That is nuts. However, of course, the cooldown on the Angel of Protection is that 60 seconds. But let's show you this buff again. This buff is pretty nuts for just tanking. And it's not going to cost you a whole lot other than a few stats that normally an augment. You saw that there again. That is insane. The ward absorbs an absolute butt ton amount of damage there. 771,000, where Halaster actually went ahead and hit me for 1,000,000 base damage there. So this Angel of Protection is a huge benefit outside of, just being able to heal you and give you that extra defense. Things are still in development, but you get my point. These active companions can be very helpful, and now by them not reducing your stats by an overall amount, they can be very helpful. For a tank, you may want to run a different companion like this Augment, the Black Dragon Ironstone, as it will give you a buff to your hit points, your critical avoidance, along with your defense. And the actual additional HP that they benefit you there is 9,000, which is pretty decent. And this is because this specific augment has that enhancement of giving additional HP. It is hard to judge between whether you need to run an augment or an active companion, but at least you won't be overly penalized like you were on the actual live server, where the difference in stats between an augment and an active companion was a huge jump there, due to the companion not giving you your stats outside of the bottling runestones. Alright, so now for the results of the DPS check and my overall opinions. Well, here is the DPS check for Xuna. I did about 20 minutes for the Abyssal Chicken and also Xuna, and you can see Xuna done there about 3000 encounter DPS. And yeah, that's pretty abysmal compared to me just using my at-will power, Duelist Flurry, getting there already nearly 25,000 encounter DPS. You can see more in depth of Xuna's damage here. You could see most of it again is still her bloodbath, and the rest there being 15% being her stab. See, the encounter DPS 3000. That is, in my opinion, not enough to constitute using this pet as a damage companion rather than using an augment to buff a few stats. However, the difference is minimal in buffing those stats, so overall it's not really going to make too much of a difference. And looking at the outgoing damage of the Abyssal Chicken, you can see it's even worse there. It's only at 1850. That's nearly half as much of what Xuna does, and each of these again is against 4 targets. They have 4 dummies available to hit, and their damage is abysmal. However, these are only these 2 companions, Xuna and the Abyssal Chicken, and there are many other pets out there that we can test, and we don't know exactly which ones are best for what now at the moment. A lot of testing is needed to be done. My opinion, of course, the Abyssal Chicken is probably most likely not the best for single target anymore, and nor is Xuna, as they both have powers which are specifically for AoE. Xuna's Bloodbath and the Abyssal Chicken's Swarm, whereas you have some companions like the Batiri, where he literally just concentrates on dealing single target damage and does a bit more even against bosses. However, in my opinion, it's not going to be such an impact anymore. If you want to run with an augment companion, fine, do so. If you want to run with a summoned active companion that's going to help you out by doing some damage, then yes, do so, as it's not going to overly impact your character stats. However, in endgame where you're just trying to min-max and scrape up every single little piece of stats, well, it may make more of an impact, and you might want to run that augment to give you those little bit more stats of the enhancement bonus. So in my opinion, either way you want to go is going to be fine. However, I really like the opportunity now that we can run other types of companions that do more utility type buffs, like let's say buffing party damage, or making yourself more tanky, like using the Angel of Protection, etc. Those kind of companions. And you don't necessarily have to run an augment to maintain your stats at a reasonable place. So yes, I'm going to conclude it here. This has been my overall thoughts and opinions and testing of the difference between an active companion and a augment companion. Now, of course, all of these things are open to change, especially with us giving more of our feedback on what we deem necessary. In my opinion, I would go out there and try and get active companions to at least do a little bit more damage. However, again, they're only there to compensate for the stats that an augment would give you, and that's it. And the stats an augment would give you is only going to be like a few more percent in regards to dealing damage, if that's what you're interested in. So hopefully I have presented this well. If I did, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.